Hello and welcome to the premier Dominion 6 podcast, which we have not named yet because we don't know what's good in the game yet. So I am here today with the former All Stats No Res crew with some additions and subtractions. I am your host, HP Munchcraft. One of your hosts with me is Sauron, Ravsier, Darkwolf, and Friggodin if he wants to talk, though he may choose to just listen, I don't know. So, we're going to be discussing some of our first thoughts on Dominion 6. None of us has played the game very much. None of us are playtesters. None of us are very good yet. So, take all these with a grain of salt. This is just very initial rough opinions. Not any kind of official advice. Please, I do not want to see forum posts 5 years in the future talking about how the All Stats No Res podcast said something was good and you should take it because of some fucking brain fart I had in the first week of the game's launch. With the caveats out of the way, what are we thinking about Dominion 6?
All right. I'll start this off here because I specifically stayed blind to all YouTuber content because I did not want to get jealous and start cursing at YouTubers for having a game I wanted first, which was a very real possibility. And honestly, after the first couple of days of playing the game, I want to say I've really enjoyed it. I like a bunch of the changes. Let's have a moment. I just want to hold a moment of silence for Spear Mooch and Bakemono Show. Can I get one from everybody here?
Uh,
No.
no, it's a podcast. No dead space. Fuck it.
Yeah.
Rest in peace, the Bakemono Show and Spear Mooch. Amen.
I will say that cultists tried to play Shiniyama in a blitz, and the Bake cultist or Bake show, even the Yari version, did fucking garbage.
Same.
I was gonna say also Shinuyama is not sloth, a disorder nation now, so it's officially pissed.
Yeah, that lines up with your samurai dudes.
All right.
And I guess you have to dump gold into the Obakemono now to expand. I don't know.
I mean, you could already do that in the last game, so
Yeah.
let's go.
Well,
It was
already
do that are two
all we're
different
saying
things.
is Illwinter saw one of the few pure scales nations that was like pretty top tier, and they're like, you know what? We need to make them worse.
All right. I'm gonna give my thoughts. So I think personally, I was kind of happy to get Dominion 6 when it came out. However, I do think, like one of the beta testers was saying earlier, about 2 or 3 weeks ago, that the game needed a little more time to playtest, and I think he was right. There's a lot of bugs on launch, a lot more than I think we saw it on Dime 5 launch. So although I love Dominions very much, I think it needed a little more time to fix those bugs. I think some of the changes that occurred, like we didn't have too many insane changes outside of the spear change. I think that was a very poor decision to change pierce damage and then make the rounding change, which effectively removes 1 damage to all spear units, and then not test any of the spear units, which are a major part of a lot of nations. So a lot of your nations across the board, all the spear units, they just don't function. You should don't believe me. At least at the time of this recording, you can run some spear units into expansion, and they just do not function anymore whatsoever. I think that was some oversight that probably didn't need changing because the spears were not dominant, and that ruined a very large portion of the game. But these are my initial thoughts. Maybe I'll change it in the future.
To interject while we're on this topic, I think that the piercing nerf was to finally put a nail in the coffin of the crossbow meta, or to affect bows and crossbows that got buffed in other ways. But since the base spear stat block sucks so much ass, that the little bit of splash damage it got from the piercing nerf was enough to just put it directly into the garbage can.
Yeah,
So just to add on to that, that's actually false, and the reason it's false is that not only did most non-crossbows get 50% strength for thrown, or I'm sorry, not thrown, ranged weapons such as composite bows, long bows, and short bows, as well as slings. But as well,
Slings
crossbows
still suck.
piercings also affect shields. So against most shielded units, they get effectively +1 versus what they would have
Regardless,
gotten without that. So they actually also got compensation. And the only thing that got, strictly speaking, worse in like almost every circumstance is normal spearmen.
yeah, I just think the spear change was kind of like it wasn't necessary in my opinion. And I thought a lot of those spear units actually had a unique role that now is just so abysmally
Yeah.
worse than it was. Like I think there could have been other things they could have done, or if they were going to make the change, they should have gave some sort of compensation to spears as a whole. And that is such a sweeping change that I'm a little frustrated with. But
Okay. Yeah,
in
I
addition
can
to other
continue
things,
on.
there's like a lot going on, and there's a lot of changes, and I don't think it had enough time to really get tested. And I want to flame some of the testers, but I know like
They
it's
have
not their
limited
fault.
input.
Well,
Well, to continue adding on, I think it's fair to say to Winter as well that in Dominions 5, piercing is clearly the best weapon type. But I also think it's fair to say that in Dominion 6, piercing is now clearly, at least compared. I don't know if it's worse than blunt because blunt has always been bad, and I think it's still bad.
Well, they've buffed
But
like stuff across the
I
board.
guess in certain circumstances, blunt can be like absolutely ridiculous. But piercing is now clearly like there is almost no circumstance you could
Like,
find where piercing is better than slashing.
let's point this out. So, like Blunt, for example, which was kind of undervalued in 6, now has specific spells that in Earth Magic you can add stunt if you have a blunt weapon. You know, that's a
Or
really cool
slashing.
change. Yeah,
Or
yeah.
slashing.
Yeah,
Which
so
slashing
that's a
is
cool change.
also well. The thing is, okay, so in Dominions 5, blunt, pierce, and slash all get affected by weapons of sharpness. In Dominion 6, piercing gets affected by weapons of sharpness, but not the stun effect. Blunt gets the stun effect, but not weapons of sharpness. Only slashing gets both. And
I think
slashing is now, I think, clearly the superior of the three
That's
besides that fact. And I think that just giving it the ability to carry both buffs would have been ample compensation without changing piercing in any way. And now it's like so far clearly the best out of the three that it's like
I don't
I don't
think it
know.
would fix it because I feel like spear units their role is your cheap infantry and them just slapping the cheap infantry that already struggle to perform is like a what are you doing kind of moment in my opinion. But let's like not get too like in the weeds of it because there's a lot of changes that are
Yeah,
occurring.
HP can cut that later.
right. Well, yeah, I won't cut it, but I think we'll leave
Time to
damage
move on.
types here because like that was a lot of
Yeah.
in the weeds about some shit, some stab
Malden.
man combat that is
Little
not super
technical.
relevant in my opinion.
Like regardless of the specifics, the 2D like the too long didn't read is like try running the units now. You do 2 turns of recruitment, and these guys just do not expand. They bounce off shit. Maybe that is in combination with the expansion changes, but just in general, they just bounce off of like weak provinces too. So it's like, well, what's going on here? Is it more than the damage? We don't obviously know at this point, but I personally think like it wasn't necessary to like mess with this area. That's all I'm trying to say. I think that a bigger change that a lot of us will probably have similar thoughts, and maybe the viewers might have, is I think the change I dislike the most is the 2 scales change, which we should probably get
Yeah.
into. So
So
going into -2 is I think siphoning player creativity is not a good thing, and I can understand why maybe they did it to try to like curve people into not hell blessing, but I kind of feel like this has done the opposite effect as my initial thoughts.
well,
Um,
let's go over the because I kind of agree with you that I think this game
You have to
was
explain the context. I
was
feel like.
too it was released too early. But to put it in context, the bless system has been overhauled slightly, and the scale system has been overhauled. Now in your pretender design screen, you can only take scales up to plus or -2 unless your nation or pretender have scales that go higher. The highest you can get a scale in an actual game is plus or -5, but there are a couple of exceptions. So generally, you can't get your scales higher than 3 because your the pretenders that grant you extra scales don't stack with your nation granting you extra scales. And then with the bless system, you now have bless points, and I figured out the easy way to do a formula, which is very asinine, but it is your bless points are your total mage paths on your pretender minus the number of paths that you're in. So like you take total number of mage paths minus the number of magics your pretender has access to, because the first point doesn't count, and that's how many bless points you get. And then you still need like death 8 if you want to take like a fear bless that's death 8, but if you're taking just generic blesses, you can grab your points wherever you have them and then put them into anywhere. So there's a little bit more play in certain scenarios, but I would agree with Soran that pretender design has been very highly restricted compared to 5. You have a lot less room to play around in, and I think that and this is probably the intent, the pretender design meta is going to matter less than just kind of your national lineup in this edition than it did in the last edition. Like, now obviously if someone hell blesses you, it's still a thing, but you no longer have so many points to play with.
I think
It's also real awkward when you're on something like a Garth that used to get 3 Earth bless points, and now it's just 3 generic bless points. And you're just like, you can just bless whatever you want with whatever paths.
and just
Nothing
go
needs.
for a glamour triple incarnate instead. Makes no sense.
Yeah.
Well, I
honestly,
mean,
it feels
hey,
like the system. Here, you want to talk?
yeah, but, hey, I was just gonna say, be glad for those extra bless points. Something I've noticed is that
I think it's a step in the right direction in the sense that you can customize wherever the points go, but I just think they shouldn't have taken away the total pool of points.
I think it's a step in the wrong direction. I think it's took a system that had a couple of quirks but was largely intuitive and replaces it with a system that is unintuitive and also like worse. Like the flaws the old system had are not.
The new system is highly min-maximal.
Yeah.
Even more than the old system.
Right.
I actually sorry, Rob, but I think the core issue with it, and like my biggest complaint, is you look at a nation like Shiniyama, and previously there was like 3 or 4 ways you can effectively build Shiniyama and not feel like you're building it poorly, right? You order max and you go for making Bake show, right? And you can play a whole game with like order 3, sloth 3, just using Bakemono show. You can do another build, do Dai Bakemono. You can do mixed. You can focus just on the mages. Some people would take blesses for the sorks. But the problem is with nations all having a turmoil limit and a magic limit +1, that also removed the other direction, right? Like you cannot go order 2, right? Base. You can't even, it's impossible to get up to order 3 base as Shiniyama.
Okay.
Suddenly you've taken a lot of these different ways you can build nations, and you've kind of thinned out the degree you can go.
I think you're hitting another topic we'll probably hit on, but like I guess to touch on that, I feel like if you're gonna have in my opinion, this is my opinion, and I could be wrong. I think if you're gonna have like these nation thematics, like where you're +1 order, +1 turmoil, you should start in that plus or minus, so you can still get the -80 if you want to go backwards. I don't like how Ilwinter has decided to like. So like we were messing around with Iru, for example, or Ariu, not Ariu the other day, and like you can go to luck 3, but you only can go to misfortune 1. But you don't start in luck 1, which means you effectively just get negatives. We were talking about this. And I don't like that design. I feel like if they wanted to do these thematics, allow people to still have the points and not punish them for just playing the nations. But I can understand why they did it, but I don't necessarily like the limitation. If they're going to add like Turmoil Plus, I feel like they should have a few pretenders in these nations that allow you to negate that thematic. And you have some options if you want to, but they don't exist a lot of the time.
Do you think if like Turmoil Limit just increased how much you could go up and didn't cap your order, that would be fine?
Yes.
Yeah, I don't think they should punish you negatively. I think that's a bad design choice. Like, if you can go plus, that's cool, but don't make me like it's stupid if I can go to order 3, but I start at order 0, right? And I still have to put in the 40 points if I want the bonus. And if I don't put in the 40 points, I don't get anything from having the bonus. But if I want to go negative, it just hurts me. So it's just a negative if you
So
ask me.
I'd be fine with that. I'd be fine with the current system with two caveats because it's a double-edged sword. You can no longer dump the stat as much, but technically you can take it higher than other people. But you can't. But in the current system, you can't for no reason for very obtuse reasons. You can't stack with your pretender god more
The
of the
reason is
scale
known, by the
that
way.
you already have. So you can't stack something up to 4. You can only go max 3 in the design screen if I'm interpreting it correctly, even if you take a nation with order and a pretender with order. And to me, it's like why not let people do that? Like if you have this if you're going to have this system where you have a pretender bonus and a nation bonus, then let them stack. And then the other thing is with pretenders, just nations with restricted pretender pools, and given that most of the like little mages don't have like scale changes, there's you often do not have a lot of pretenders in a particular scale, and it's like, well, that
For
gives some of the
example,
shittier titans like a reason to exist now because they might be your only guy. You know, looking at Iru, it's like maybe your DUU of farming is the only guy you can
you
take your to get more productivity, so that gives him a use. But because he is also the only guy you can take for productivity that I'm seeing on this screen right now, that just means you you don't have a lot of options if you want to mess with your scales, which seems off given that they are now supposed to be like the serious
yeah. What
part of the
really felt
game.
wrong to me, I was looking at man and area pretenders, and neither one of them can take a pretender that boosts luck limit.
Right, which
And
in the current system is fine because you couldn't boost it to 4, but that is really weird that like, oh yes, no
well,
more luckers.
I think the entire thing is problematic. I really don't like how they implemented it.
I just wish if they would have, they should have like either given you more points to play with or something. I just don't like them taking away creativity from
that
players.
is more than it's less points to play with than you had in 5.
Oh, very
Yeah,
much. I
and then scales are supposed to matter more, so it's like you get punished even more now if you go in some of these directions. Like
I
the fives and stuff hurt you.
I
So it's,
do want to bring up this point about nations with extra bless points. It is a huge advantage because you can if you can just take a single path on your pretender up to the level you need on an incarnate to get that incarnate like the old system on nations with extra bless points. On nations
Yeah.
without extra bless points, you have to take that path up, but because the first point doesn't count, you'll be short a point. So you'll have to go back and find points after taking your incarnate all the way up, right? Like you'll have to go
Yeah,
back
that's
and
true. That means
so
any non-rainbow build
yeah,
is better. Just flat out, straight up, doesn't matter what nations you're comparing. It's just a better build on the one with extra bless points. Almost always.
right.
That's just
And
not a good. It's not good.
and then just to bring it full circle, incarnates are better on rainbows because as much as you're paying through the teeth to run that one, path up, if you run a single path higher, and I was the victim of this in a blitz, so maybe this is just saltiness, but if you run a single path high, like for example glamour, then you can just take those other paths low to rack up the bless points and put multiple incarnates in that single path that you took high. If you're running a rainbow with incarnates, so like the old
They're
monster
same
incarnates
path.
are
To be
kind of
clear,
worse.
if the incarnates are in the same path, if they're in
Yes.
multiple paths, a lot of times the extra Dominion strength catches back up in terms of
Right, but I'm talking about you use that synergy. All you have to do is get one path high if you're taking multiple incarnates in that path, and then you could just pick up your bless points wherever. So like oftentimes a rainbow incarnate will be better than like a monster incarnate, which would have been the better option in Dom 5.
Well,
But if I can return to the scales bit,
Yeah.
just because so we do have some words on this matter from Christopher, and he apparently said more than what I'm finding right here. But he said it's in part to give incentives to create other pretenders than just, for example, a growth pretender on a growth nation. I don't think removing positive synergies from your game is a good idea, and I think that their idea backfired because instead of increasing, I think that they've actually still decreased the number of usable pretenders on nations. If I have like let's say I'm playing, I don't know, like Lanka,
Right.
If I wanted to take a turmoil pretender to lean into the turmoil thing, it doesn't do anything, so I'm just wasting the
Right, yeah.
turmoil on the pretender. You know, you're functionally disincentivizing people from finding interesting combinations. And like, if I want to take, like, let's give another example. Late Age Atlantis, right? They get +1 death because I don't know, they're death mages and they're up in the frozen north or whatever. You know, it's really funny. They don't get any growth pretenders on the entire nation, so they capped at growth 1 on a scales nation.
Get got.
They can't get growth 2. It's impossible, actually.
I mean, that's fine.
So while you have an uneven distribution of pretenders, some people have like 30 pretenders that give them positive scales. Some people have like 2, right?
So,
I think
it's
like
not
the
a very good
idea,
system.
the idea is like good in conception, but how it works in the game doesn't translate. I think like he built a good foundation to kind of fix parts of the games that need help, and generally, like the pretenders, at least in my opinion, and I can be wrong, like they're kind of polarizing. Like ones are pretty dominant, and we see 4s, but Titans are very niche, and monsters are either they're very specific chassis that kind of have particular rules, like the Earth Snake is solid or the Thriceborn Born. But some of these other monsters, they don't see as much play. So you could have, put more of the positive or negative scales here, but a lot of the monster pretenders just have negatives. Like, why do all the dragons have fucking sloth? Like, I don't know. Like, why does the Earth Snake have sloth? Like, they should have you should give more boons of picking these. Also, Titans should be significantly cheaper and have in my opinion, and have like the scale modifiers, because Titans are still, the price is like unchanged, and they're not as good as Rainbows, and they're not as good as Dominion 4s, in my opinion.
So
like they could have done that.
Sauron, I did want to bring up in relation to like the pretender scales and stuff. I do like the scale limit modifier in theory as like an interesting change. I do like that scales go up to 5 now in the actual game, like taking max cold and then it being winter or casting Woven Winter now matters, and I think that's like a really cool new aspect. But I just, the thing that I really don't like about the new pretender system is, instead of just letting it be intuitive and then letting the chips fall where they may after coming up with a system, it's like they come up with this system and they're like, well, people might abuse this, or this might be too strong, so let's add all these little exceptions that makes the system like less intuitive. Like to go back to Rainbows, like you could instead, like, because I know from playtesters telling me that the reason why you don't get points for the first point of Dominion, you don't get bless points for it, is because Rainbows were too strong. But Rainbows are too strong in that case because of their cost and their magic path cost. So, which you can change without it actually affecting how the game is intuitively to anybody. That's just a cost change. It's purely arbitrary. All the points are arbitrary. They don't. That's not a real, like, that's not a UI element like the like scales or bless points.
Yeah.
Or I guess it is a UI element, but it's not something that the player has to
balance them.
think about it's just automatically calculated. So it's like you've taken these things, and in order to limit them, you put exceptions on your system that are make it more complex and less intuitive, instead of just changing the costs of in the system that are all under the hood and don't like would not mess up a new player that is trying to figure out how many bless points do I get, you know? Like, so I
The best way to look at it is if there's a card game and there's a category like spell cards, right, are problematic, and there's 4 categories of cards. And instead of going in and balancing the spell cards, you change the way the card, your income works in the card game to nerf spell cards. You're nerfing something that affects all 4, or changing something that affects all 4 instead of targeting the problem. In which
Right.
case it causes other problems and makes it like you do something that doesn't make sense, or else you would have done it originally, but you did it to target a specific group instead of actually targeting that group with the change.
Let's define this. So you kept on saying intuitive, but I was a little puzzled what you meant by
well,
what would make the system more intuitive,
so-
or what do you mean by intuitive?
well, what I mean is, okay, if the first point counted, then you would have a
Right.
system where a magic path on your pretender equals a bless point. Total magic paths are your bless points. That's very easy to understand. That's very
okay.
easy to explain, right? And then with
Right.
scales, you're like, okay, you go plus or minus 2, unless your nation or pretender changes it. That's very easy to understand or explain. But right now, what
Yeah.
it is your bless points are your paths on your pretender minus the number of paths he's in, which is a lot less intuitive and easy to explain. And your scales are plus or minus 2, unless your nation, or pretender changes it. But they can only change it to a max of 3, or they don't stack past 3, unless you have a plus 2 on the nation already. But the pretender can't stack it past 3, which is like a lot of words.
Oh,
when
by
you
the
could have
way,
just made
you
it
forgot
stack.
something there, HP. They cancel each other out too, even though they don't stack. So have fun.
Wait,
Oh,
what?
Yeah, I feel like the scale changes. There's like a few ways. I think they should stack past 3 if you're gonna put it in the game. And I feel like, in my opinion, you should start with that +1 if your nation or pretender gives it, instead of forcing the player to pay for it. You're already paying for the chassis in terms of the pretender. So why are you making them pay for the scale now when they clearly picked that most likely for the scale, right?
Oh,
The
I
chassis
see
and
what
the
you're
scale.
getting.
Like, why are they double dipping in some of these cases and double punishing a player for picking something? And if they don't even pass as 3, there's not a lot of point in some cases to take it.
It's like how as Iryu you're incentivized to make a luck nation because they get like, or TNN. Sorry, TNN is incentivized to go luck because it has the luck bonus, but it doesn't actually get cheaper, and you just can't dump misfortune. So all it does is
Yeah.
take away options from you.
Yeah,
It
that's
doesn't
what I said
actually make
earlier.
that better. Yeah.
Yeah, that's exactly what I said earlier. I just don't like the design.
So,
By the way, we have harped on a lot of the negatives so far of Dominion 6.
We should talk about the positives.
There are I think a lot of foundation changes that I like.
yeah,
Maybe we should get into that so people don't think we just hate Dominions. Like,
well, let's
there
talk
are,
about
like-
let's talk about the positives now. So
okay, so there's some really good. So in my opinion, I'll start us, I guess, since we're talking. So I think the summons being buffed, a lot of them across the board, is a good change.
I don't
Granted-
mind that did that.
Yeah, granted, I would have liked if they would have kept the previous costs on some of them. So it's like, if you get a double Mudman or something, just leave it at 5. But
I'm sure
it's still-
Draconians aren't problematic at all.
I don't
Yeah,
think they'll be
regardless,
problematic.
regardless, the summon
You don't
changes.
I think they're problematic, HP. I
well,
think they're a
we'll
problem
see.
already.
But hey, you would have never said they were problematic last edition, so that's like kind of
That's
like
a good thing. That's
I
their
mean, I
privilege.
guess it might be. but
right. Like
I will
like
say, in my opinion, the way that they have moved spells around has made the spell tree and spell schools more balanced.
okay,
I
Yeah,
like
I agree.
that
The Thom
mid-tier
buff is
mages
good.
have more to do in fights than just boosting themselves up to your army-wide thing in the mid-game. So
Yeah.
I think that the general magic changes are
Okay.
thumbs up from me. Good job.
Yeah, I really like what they did to alteration and enchantment, especially definitely thaumaturgy. Like they kind of
Yeah.
they took some power out of alteration. I like that. Evo, all of them are good. Besides, the only tree I feel like that was neglected is blood, and a lot of people jerk off blood, saying it's so OP, and it wasn't OP in 5, in my opinion. It was not. It just had.
I think blood was the strongest late game magic, and I think it
I think it
still
had.
is.
Okay, my opinion on blood is it has 2 problematic spells. At least mid game. Early, there's fucking nothing in this school unless you have a
Tim?
national spell. So
And there's no LPs.
listen.
Imps. Just run the imps at them.
But
Infernal
LPs got
is-
nerfed, so it's fine.
Listen, Infernal Disease should be 20 slaves. It's still not, so that's still there. This blight on the game is still there. It should be 20 slaves or 15 slaves. It should not be 5, not 10, but something in the 15s or 20s. They should fix that at some point. But I feel like there was a lot of opportunity to fix this tree, in my opinion. Like there's some summons here
They
that are.
did take part of it. They did nerf Vampire Lords, which I think was a good change.
Listen,
Let's not sit here.
no one cares about Blood 7 if you're a Blood Nation and you still have to play with 1 through 6. These spells are not. No one
Okay, yeah, that
cares.
is true.
Community
I'm saying
note:
the
many
Vampire
people in the
Lord-
community do care about Blood 7 because many
Yeah.
games that Sauron isn't in go late.
Yeah, a lot of people don't raid.
No, but
No,
he is right. Blood 1 through 6
I didn't
is
say
really
people
bad.
didn't care about vampires. I'm just saying, like,
You did?
the early parts of the game, like, people. Well, I probably
Yeah.
misspoke. Whatever.
The way you say it is funny. The point we were trying to make is Blood's problem before was that in the early to mid game, it's a very boring path where you constantly build up slaves to forge lifelong protections from construction, and then build up till you get your late game shit. And they did properly nerf one of the late game. I think something that was a little too overtuned, which was the Vampire Lord.
They
However-
nerfed LLPs and vampires, but they
There's nothing
should
to
have
do
gave
with
back.
The problem is
They-
it's still
like-
path where you get to Reign of Jaguars research and suddenly you're just shitting out Infinity Sacreds.
Well, yeah, but I'm not even talking about the nationals. I just think the generic should have been given some love because there's genuine summons here that do not see play, like Serpent Fiends and Spine Devils. Like you can't tell me
Bone
you
Fiends.
Because everyone bases it on like what Miklin or Zabalba does with it, and not.
yeah, it shouldn't be
Well, it's
about the
also-
nationals.
Yeah, it's also that they're so mage inefficient compared to a lot of the national.
Yeah, like
That's
all they had
why
to,
the national spells are so strong, right? I
Let-
can get 3 sacred.
I made some multiplier.
3
on it. It's
sacred.
not
You know, like
justified.
let's go. No,
The
let's
national
go look
already-
at Blood 4, right? What are the generic Blood 4 spells? I can get 1 Storm Demon for 10 slaves, or I can get 3 sacred flying demons
Well,
for 16.
It-
Same
it's
number
not
of mage turns, it's just so much better, right?
it's
Can
not
I-
even
The
comparable.
turns on blood mages is like
okay,
worth
Can
blood slaves.
can I bring up something from the game that I like that is completely separate from blood magic?
Well,
Yeah,
hold
go
on. Well, let me make my last point about blood. I think they should have just added a scaling on the blood summons to allow these spells that are not used to at least to say see potential play, and then maybe buff some of these that don't see play whatsoever. If they weren't seeing play in 5, they sure as hell ain't seeing play in 6. You know, so
True.
I don't know
like
about the
But
scaling, but I agree with you.
that was your point on your last point on blood magic because we are
Yeah.
still in the good things segment and I haven't gotten my good things, so people might still
Yeah.
think I just hate the game for no reason.
all right.
So
all right, okay.
Cave Layer, the Cave Layer whips ass in my opinion. I think that thing
Oh, it's
rules
fantastic.
hard. I think the people
I've
who are
been testing EA Perin, and the cave layer is very variable.
it is very variable,
Ready.
but hey,
So
that's,
hot and
that's
cold.
glorious. All the people who are saying it's a new underwater are chodes. Like it rules. Also, the terrain on the battlefield. Battlefield terrain rules. Anybody who is sad because they trampled a poison mushroom is just sour grapes. I love.
Poison
all-
mushrooms is hilarious.
I love all the
Yeah,
little
that is funny.
trees and rocks and mushrooms. I love that you can animate trees. I hope that you can animate rocks, and I really hope you can animate the crystals in the cave. Have a living crystal go around and beat people up. That would whip. So,
Yeah, I agree.
so I think those are good changes. I think they could have done
Question.
more with the terrain, but I'm glad that it's in the game. So now you can do more
Mod it.
to it if as the devs or as modders.
It seems like the poison on the mushrooms is pretty big. I don't know. Just,
Shut up, bro.
Listen, Rob, I'll kill you.
Giant.
Like,
The giant
accidentally
Age of
route
Empires.
your entire army big sometimes.
I mean,
Maybe slightly too big.
it might be the case.
I'm sorry, I'm just looking at some mushrooms, and it looks like they don't have poison resist, and there's multiple exploding mushrooms directly adjacent to each other.
It might
Anyway,
be the
As
case
if
that
one
you're...
could set off multiple
getting a
other
Suicide
ones in
Squad
a
in,
kind of
get
chain
trampled by
reaction.
dogs, and
Alright,
trigger the
so-
mushrooms is high tactics, and we should leave it in the
Yeah.
game.
So it may be the case that your guys who start on top of a mushroom should not immediately
No.
trample it and rout your army. But
Sauron.
But-
Sauron. No,
I-
sorry, HP. I figured it out.
no,
What?
I think
That's how they buff blood.
no, Dark Wolf.
Stop.
shh. I think that there should be a spell later in the game that just a nature mage comes in and just detonates every mushroom on the map.
Instantly, y'all see the Pretender that Christopher made is like an example mod.
No, I didn't see that.
Oh, it's the mushroom pretender or whatever.
Wait, there's a
Oh,
mushroom
no.
pretender? I missed that.
In the mod, in the
Yeah.
mods, in the
In
mods
the
store.
Steam Workshop,
Oh, okay. Oh, it's an example mod. He made a mushroom pretender. That's
he
fun.
made a Mushroom Pretender as an example mod.
Well, we need to add that. We need animate mushrooms. I want to see mushroom men running around. I want to see them punching people like it's Dark Souls
Oh.
1.
Something that
Dark Souls 1 mushrooms is hilarious.
one of the great changes I'm really happy that they did is they made fire magic not dog shit anymore. It's got summon salamanders, it's got buffs, it's no longer a dog shit path.
Yeah,
So
like
Yeah.
Fire Darts is like multi-proj AP damage for easy cast, low
Hell
research.
yeah. Dude, I love
Fire
the little
magic is-
salamanders. Send a bunch of little fire rats at people.
I just wish there was a bigger nest of salamanders so I could be truly cancer. Oh yes, I'm shitting out a bunch of salamanders.
One issue I have is they nerfed Swarm. Like, when are you ever casting that now?
It was probably in relation to dryads, to be honest with you. I
Yeah.
think that's why they
Yeah.
did. Well, I think they
Okay.
should have just nerfed dryads instead of swarm, if you ask me. But okay,
Listen,
Like,
I've seen
You
that the
need
new
to
thing
figure
is
out
that
assassin- I think assassins are probably still broken in some way.
Have you seen one of how the new assassinations go?
Yeah, like when they show
In
up
the tavern.
table
Yeah.
attacks them and
I
shit.
have had my assassins get punched to death by commoners.
Well, a lot of them have daggers. You have to understand. They're always armed. They go to the tavern armed and they're
I had
ready.
I had the blood slave event where like the family
Yeah,
attacks
yeah,
the
yeah.
guy, and
The guy doesn't
my my blood hunter beat the shit out of them.
I mean,
Well,
Oh,
I
yeah.
abstain from blood hunting, so I haven't encountered that yet.
I was
I'm a
messing around with
Blood
long.
Orange Jedi there. That's great. See that?
There's some funny changes.
I like that because it's a nerf to assassins, but it's a nerf that makes them more engaging instead of less. It's like, yeah, okay, your bottle of living water will still probably clear out the Tavern of Commoners, but
Yeah,
like,
it's an interesting side grade, in my opinion.
yeah, it is.
It's
I like it.
it's a okay. I'm gonna say it's a side grade in terms of balancing. In every other way, it's an improvement.
I think if they're gonna do the tavern stuff, the open field assassin map should have tents or something. That would be pretty cool.
That would be cool.
Instead
In
of
the
it
background,
being-
if nothing else.
Instead of it being like this, like
Can I
plains.
can I bring something up in a forum where Winter might hear about it?
Okay, go for it.
Why is it that retreating from an assassination battle kills you when
Honestly,
the actual goal of either party realistically would be to escape the assassination battle, all else failing, right?
so what all you got to do now, Winter, is you add a direction that's the escape route, and on some of the maps where the assassin corners them, it can be through the assassin, and then when if the target routes, they should run for the escape route, and if they survive, they survive, and if they don't, like, they die. You know, like, so maybe that might entail you route, and you have to try to run past the assassin, and he gets to take swipes
And
at
maybe
you on
if
the
the
way out.
assassin runs, they encounter some guards instead of just auto dying.
Right, right.
Yeah.
Yeah, they have like a
You could
chance
have
to get
you could
away.
have the like you could have the tent
Like if
scenario.
the assassin runs,
and
there's
there's
a patrol
guards.
check or something, and
Right.
if you beat
Yeah.
the patrol check, you get to live.
I think
Makes sense to
there are there's some like throne room event. I haven't seen it myself, but there's some like throne room event where like an assassin tries to get you in the throne room, and then like actual guards show up with spears to poke him in the ass.
Don't worry, I had a lab burn down underwater, and a fire elemental caused by the lab burning down attempt to assassinate a Raijin. And so now, of course, we appear in the watery void lab. There's a building underwater in the void of the water because you can't see the ground of the water, and
That rules.
it's just in the watery void, right? And in that watery void, in the building underwater, there's a fire elemental, of course, and it's attacking a Raijin. That one was interesting.
Who won?
Oh, the fire elemental, of course.
He also had the Raijin
So,
friendly fire incident where he had 17 Raijin in a combat that all killed his own units because they led the enemy units with falling frost.
Falling frost will lead the enemy target, and if the enemy target is like 2 tiles away from hitting your troops when they're preparing to cast,
just drop it on your fucking troops. Yeah, that was a problem in 5. I thought they'd fix that, but
well, I mean, they're just trying to lead the target. It's not their fault that the enemy or the allies got in the way.
Listen, there's some good funny changes.
Listen. I got 2 takes here. One, all you have to do is make a check where if the allies are worth more than 10 gold, you won't fire. All right, easy.
No, you should.
If they're worth
that. Let's introduce more complicated and arbitrary math into our targeting.
Now, the real take. I don't know.
No. While we're here, Dark Wolf, do you have anything you like about this version?
That's what I was about to say.
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, and then you interrupted me. HP, what's wrong with you?
I'm looking at my
Anyway,
timer.
I don't know what the common consensus is because I have ignored every YouTuber and most people. However, I actually really like the economy changes. I think it needs some tweaking. I feel like the expansion phase may be a little bit too slow now, but I haven't actually played a PvP Blitz yet, so who the fuck knows? However, I like the fact that mages feel valuable and that like having a level 2 mage, you could feel like it could turn the battle with some evocations or whatever, or some buffs. And that armies are a bit bigger, and that the scale of the troops in comparison to the mages and infrastructure is grown. So, like, I don't know if this is common opinion even here, but I like that change. I just think it needs some tweaking on the number end, but that's kind of light work comparatively.
Some of it has produced the opposite, if you ask me, because things are so much slower and because it's harder to get your research out and your mages out. I feel like the early game, maybe like years 1 and 2, I want to say, they feel very like PD dumping is strong and it's very like kind of like mash your forces against each other to combat, which isn't the most interesting if you ask me. I do like using more troops, but I kind of feel like it's maybe produced the opposite effect, but that's my opinion. I can be wrong.
Either if anyone hasn't given positives, let's get them in, or we can end this segment.
Cave Layer, Pog, new magic trees, Pog.
Oh, I love the size changes, and I like the idea of giving mounts and characters separate.
I don't like that they nerfed stuff like Bakemono, but the size generals in general are good.
Rob, did you get in what you had to say?
Well, I did say I liked the new spell tree and how it was rebalanced. I think they did a really good job of that. The other thing, and this one's kind of spicy take, a little controversial because I know a lot of people are still frustrated by it. The army setup changes on the army setup screen. Well, I like most of them, but why did you put a control in front of all of my formation hotkeys, Winter?
So,
why would you do that?
So, Friggodin, do you have any?
They don't overlap other hotkeys. There's no reason.
Do you have
to put
any
a control in front
positive
of the
changes you
hotkeys.
want to talk about, Friggodin?
But I did want to say, even the inverted thing, I think that in the long term, that's actually a better hotkey setup with the inverted mouse clicks compared to 5, because
it just makes everyone mauled on the first few days, but
in a few weeks we'll be used to it and it'll be better.
Yeah, like the muscle memory stuff is whatever. You'll get used to it. Most of my muscle memory is the same. It's just like the clicking sometimes would get me. I think I'm done with it at this point.
All right. So, Friggodin, any positives that you didn't get to?
I don't know about enumerating them here, but there's a ton of shit I like about the new game.
All right, cool.
And I just think there's some things that need to be figured out.
The new indies are Pog. I think that was a great thing. Add more indies. If you want to add Spider Clan, go for it. If you want
Wait,
to,
what did they add? I didn't even know.
they added a new cave indie. I think that was a cool change.
They added
Well,
they
there's
added a
new
cave indie to go with
Iran
like
EA troops are
Pyrenes
okay,
guys.
Oh, okay, yeah, those guys. I know.
Yeah.
I think they should make Lavaborn be an F1. That would be an interesting change if you ask me. Allow people to
Agree.
find F1. That was the only CBM change I've ever liked. If you don't know what communist balance mod is, that it was probably the least common. I want to preface this. It is the least played mod, balance mod, quote unquote. It played in Dominion Spot. I think it was definitely the least. And anyone who tells you otherwise is lying.
Yeah, anyone who tells you otherwise thinks he means the other CBM because there's like 3. So.
Yes, there's a CBM from Dominions 3 that was very popular. That was kind of what DE was going for, but the CBM in Dominions 5 was very controversial.
Well, CBM and no, the DE in Dominions 5 is a content mod. It's not.
No, but it was
Well,
based off of.
It's HP Munchcraft here, and just letting you know, I have split this episode into 3 45-minute segments for editing purposes. I'd like to say that the next one is going to be out soon, but I don't know that for sure. So join us next time when we continue our first thoughts on Dominion 6, starting with the economics of it.